we're going to be repairing an original 1928 Harley J model front end. These things tend to get beat up over time. They get bent from wrecks, they get pitted from rust, which is the case with this one. A customer actually sent this to me a few weeks ago, and I had straightened it because it was all bent. It was all covered in powder coat. The whole front end was powder coated. He sent me the front and rear forks, and I straightened them, got them tweaked back in for him. And when he got them back home and stripped them for new paint, he realized that the front end was completely pitted. And you can see on the bottom lower leg here, it's actually pretty bad shape. It's actually got pinholes in it and everything else. So what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna walk you guys through replacing these fork tubes. We're gonna debraze the original front fender mount spring perch here, debraze these bottom axle mounts, and then I have to machine and thread and make completely new spring fork tubes to put back into these castings and rebraze everything back together for him so that he can get this thing on the road. Let's get started. All right, so first thing we're gonna do here is I'm going to trim these fork tubes off up here. So we got a rosebud on. This will put out the most heat in the quickest period of time here. We're gonna try using this. Usually this old braze on these old forks and frames and stuff that we work with, it's pretty strong. So we're just gonna throw a bunch of heat to it and see how well this, how well we can remove this tube out of here. And we wanna try to heat up around the perimeter of the casting as much as we can until we start seeing that braze liquefy. It's at really high temperature, much higher than the silver braze that we use. Pretty much have to get this thing red hot. There we go. You can start seeing that braze liquefy now. Starting to break up. This is always super cool. You gotta think, last time this stuff was liquid form like this was 100 years ago. Whenever the guy was in the factory building these things. Just something really cool to think about. Debraze this top fender mount, and I realized, which I knew they did it on these bottom pieces, but there was a couple stake pins in there, so it doesn't allow me to fully, I can melt the braze, but I can't pull them out because they have pins through to help strengthen that joint. So that's going to change the plan here a little bit. What I'm going to do now is, I know that these are pinned as well, so what we're going to do is I'm going to put these on the lathe, and I'm going to cut the tubes off these on the lathe. And then on the fender mount here, to be able to reuse this, as you can see, I just cut the tubes. I'm going to have to fixture this up in the mill, and I'm going to have to mill these tubes and pins out to do it correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, get this all set up, and get this, once we get them all milled out, cleaned up, I'll go through, I'll vapor hone, get this casting all cleaned back up. We'll get it ready to put in our fixture, and we'll start rebrazing everything once we make brand new tubes. I can see right where my seam is, where the tube would meet the casting lip. This casting has a step down inside, and it actually goes and slip fits up inside the tube here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut right at that seam so I know where I'm at. I already see the top part. I cut the tube at the top part so I know where my end is. I'm gonna trim this back, and because these are so pitted, I can't really see where the pins or anything are where it's brazed. So I'm just gonna peel it back off the lathe. That way I can preserve and reuse this original lug. You can even see the original AC-13 casting mark there. So I want to be able to reuse as much as the original as we can. What we ended up doing on our lower legs, instead of trying to find the pins through all the porosity and the rot on the bottom of the, the rust and all the pitting, what we did is I ended up just chucking this in to the lathe here. I machined it down, made us a new lug, and what I'm going to do is, these are the tubes, this is the size of the tubing that I make to replace the legs when we machine those. I'm just making those so they slip inside of these lugs. So we're just making a whole new surface. And as you can see, I removed all the pitting and everything off there, got down to the bare steel. So I'm gonna go ahead and lop this one off now. This is nice, and the rest of this lug it's all solid here, so nice and strong. Won't have to worry about anything like that. But this will give us a chance to reuse these original parts. And the only thing he's gonna really need new is the tubes that I have to make. So, and now it slips right in our new tube like that. So I'll be able to go ahead and braze this up when we're building the new front end here. But this is nice, so now I can reuse his original axle plate rocker studs there. I just finished cleaning these up, and now I can see exactly where the stake pins are. And again, these are to reinforce those braze joints. The factory used to do this with a lot of the joint connections where they would actually apply the braze. They call it stake and pin. So drill a hole, drive a little pin through. And these, sometimes I see them go all the way through. This time I'm only seeing one. There's just a little pin here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to machine out these old tubes and get these cleaned up for the new tubes here. So we're going to fixture these up in the mill and get those cleaned up. These are actually something that we started making now. So we're building new front ends for the 28, 29s. We got the rear forks, front forks, all that good stuff. So these are our castings, and you can see the comparison here. They're identical, but just an FYI, we're making these now. So now we can produce these front ends. This actually worked out super well. You know, we machine castings and stuff like that all the time, but coming in and cleaning these out like this, it makes it nice. So it gives me a nice new clean surface to apply the braze to when we're reassembling these forks. So what I did is I ended up just fixturing this up in the vices you see here. I came in, I indicated where I was at on my center, and then I just bored a new hole, cleaned all the old tubing out, and all that was really left was that little chunk there. But so now all we're gonna do is I'm gonna set up again. My inline plane's the same from front to back here. So I'll just drop this bed down a little bit, moving on over, get centered up on this next hole, get my tilt, because these things actually have a little bit of a camber to them. So I'll get that camber adjusted in for my center, and then I'll bore this other side. Actually went super easy for once. So we got the old tubes out. and you can kind of look down in there and just see the little bit of the remnants of bronze, the braze there. But we followed the exact holes. So now what's nice about this is, once we get this part cleaned up here, let me find my file. Little chunk of tube left on the outside here. We'll get that cleaned up. But now we got brand new sleeve bores there. Our next step of this whole process, we got the lower legs all cleaned up. We machined those. This next step here, I got to make completely new fork tubes. But as you can see, those slide right in perfectly now. So that's going to work really, really nice for when we're fixturing up this new fork here for our customers. So another piece of the puzzle. What we're doing now is I have my 1-inch tube. I use an 065 wall tube for my fork, for the front spring forks here, and these are internal springs on the JD. So the spring for your suspension rate is actually inside this tube. And in order to do that with the plungers and the entire assembly, you guys have seen in other videos that I've done on my race forks and that kind of thing. It's the same exact concept, only these are a little bit wider. That's the only really difference on this setup. So what Harley did is, as the years went on and the bikes got bigger and heavier, they just added external springs, which are what these are here, these spring perches. And it's what you still see on modern day springers today and big twin choppers and everything else, is external spring perches. So with those external springs, external springs and the internal springs, that's what they did on these style front ends. But what we're getting ready to do is make the actual tubes that the springs go into. So what I usually run here is I run my length. These are the different spring sizes. These are the different tubes I make. I just made myself a little chart with all my measurements on it. And I'll measure this out, I'll part it, and then what we do is I clean the ends up. I taper them down just a little bit for the threads, because what happens is the springs go in, they go under preload tension, and this cap screws down on the top and contains your spring. So all of your load, your spring are on those caps. So I have to thread that in, and then I have to make the running track for the plunger. So in order to do that, once I get done threading it and barreling it on this thing, I take it over to the mill. I fixture it up on my mill. I got a special roughing milling bit that I got, and what I do is I carve my my runner track for my plunger so they stay in plane. So I got to make 2 of these. Obviously, there's 1 per side. And once I get these all made up on the mill and the lathe, we'll take them over to the fixture bench, and those castings that we just repurposed, cleaned up, we bored the insides out, bored the bottom lugs, machined them down all nice brand new again. We're going to put that all together, fixture it up, and I'm going to braze it all back together. So we just finished up our fork tube. This is a completed one, and in the earlier years, these would be shorter, and so would the slot lengths, because like I was telling you earlier about the springs, Harley didn't add the external springs until the later mid-20s, I should say. But this is a complete one here, 27.5 inches long, 11-inch slot length, so our plungers will go down in here. And as you can see, we threaded this, so our cap goes on there perfectly. Once your plunger goes down in, this will be capped at the base with that rocker plate casting here that we are actually just machined up earlier. And the spring will go down in, it'll compress, and then that cap goes on. So this is a complete one. We got to make one more up. And once we do that, we'll get these over to the fixture bench, get our newly machined 100-year-old castings all put together, and we'll start brazing this thing up. We finished up machining our new fork tubes. These are both machined and cut to length of a new set of tubes. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to take them over to the bench here, and I'm going to drill some small holes for the bottom lugs that we actually machined out. Because what I'm going to do with these, just for reassurance and peace of mind, a couple different ways that I do these is you can get a real thin paste solder, bronze or braze, and you can actually insert these and heat the lug, and it'll actually absorb right into the joint, which I don't have any of those on hand right now. I'm not particularly a huge fan of those. I like to make sure these things aren't going to go anywhere. So what I'm going to do with this particular setup, especially since it's going to be making a cross-country trip, is I machine these so they fit real nice and tight in our tubes. But I'm going to drill and I'm going to plug weld, TIG them, and then I'm going to take the bottom joints. And when I'm all done cleaning them up and everything, you're never even going to see that joint. So especially once it's painted and everything, you'll never even know. And then for the top portion, we're going to slide these into our new machine casting that we took the old tubes out of. And you can see a nice tight fit there. And we'll set our height up. And we got a little bit of a slot there, which we want. So it gives that braze somewhere to go into that joint. And we're going to use the LFP low fuming bronze to fill that joint. So we're going to get started on that. We'll get it all fixtured up in our table fixture here and get this front fork completed today. We're all fixtured up now. I got my plate in there to align my slots on the machine tubes. I got my lugs bolted in down here with the correct spacing. And then I got my distance from the top to the bottom set up. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start heating the sides here. And I'm going to start applying some LFP to the joints. And we're going to get this thing brazed up. Once we get this part done, we'll take it over to the bench and we're going to do some plug welding and get those bottom lugs fixed in. Now, unlike the silver braze that we use, this LFP, it requires a much higher heat before it actually melts. So we got to get these lugs nice and hot before we can even think about starting to apply this filler. A nice glowing red joint here. I'm going to start feeding the filler into the joint. And you can see that braze going in right now. And what I'll do is I start applying it, I'll heat the other side of it, and what it'll do is it'll try to wick it to the other side. It'll pull it through all the way through the joint. You call it chasing. At least I do. Pulling that bronze right in. hopefully last for another 100 years. It's always cool when we can save these original castings. You know, this front end was beat up pretty bad. It was rotted, as you guys could see at the beginning there. And you know, obviously we make new castings, we make new parts, but it's always fun to try to save what was already been, you know. This is, again, I like to think of this as like the last time this thing was heated was 100 years ago, when the guy doing it was working for Harley-Davidson, and the founders were alive in their offices working alongside all their employees. You know, it's just kind of a super cool thought. You know, the last time this thing was touched was, you know, from the factory. It's just stuff I think about, nerd out about. All right, that's a really nice joint. I'm gonna add just a little bit more right here. I'm pretty happy with that. So that's one side down. We're gonna hit up this other side now. We gotta get this stuff super hot, unlike silver. So silver's tricky when you're brazing with, because it flows super nice, but if your temperature gets out of control, it'll start killing it. You know, it won't take. So you have to be just in the right temperature range. And silver is not very hot compared to, you know, LFE like this. So it's a whole different animal. And when you're doing this stuff, you got to get it really, really hot. It's actually kind of surprising sometimes how hot you have to get it, but when you have it flux up nice and a nice clean joint, this stuff takes really well. And I can already see this joint getting hot. The heat's been transferring through this entire casting, so this one won't take as long to heat up. Here's where all your meat is, right? So you have this entire piece over here. So I like to try to focus on where the meat is first and get that a little bit hotter. Because once you get that up to temp, that outside ring will get really, really hot fast because there's not very much material there. So once I start getting that glowing, I'm pretty sure the rest of it's going to take pretty quick. I just love brazing. It's so cool watching your filler just kind of whip right around that joint. So we're all finished up with that. So that top joint's all finished up. What we're gonna do now, we're gonna let this cool off for a little while, cool down so that we can actually, you know, handle the front fork. Those are nice and straight. And what we'll do is, I already had pre-drilled these earlier. I'm gonna take this over as it is in the fixture to the bench, and I'm gonna plug weld those couple spots there, and then we're going to run a nice TIG bead around the bottom, and that's going to make those bottom lugs nice and strong, because I like to tight fit those up in there. It doesn't really leave a lot of room for the braze to get down into the actual joint. So in order to do, I like to weld that bottom part there. So we'll let this cool off and we'll get this thing finished up, and then the last step's going to be just cleaning up off all the extra flux and you know, getting that all cleaned up, ready to go. We just finished up our front fork here. We were able to save the bottom lugs here and the original casting for the spring perch, the front fender. It turned out pretty nice. I'm happy with it. We machined 2 new tubes, got them all straightened out, put them on our jig, brazed up the top end, pinned it, and then we have our bottom lugs. We actually plug welded and TIG welded on here just to add that rigidity and that strength. I always feel better about doing the weld on the bottoms just because I know personally they're going to hold, especially with the plug welds and the TIGging. And when it's all said and done, you can't see them, the joints or anything, because that brazes, it's such a tight fit, you know, it has to pull up in there. So I feel really good how this turned out. Hopefully the customer feels the same way. Nice and straight now. He doesn't have to worry about the pitted tubes that we cut off of here. So we're able to get him squared away. The rear portion of this I already fixed for him. It was all tweaked and bent out of shape. I had straightened that earlier on. So this is going to get sent back out to him. The other thing we have to do for him is we have to replace some rear frame tubes for him, and he can start putting this bike back together. This is going to be a 28-29 model that he's going to be racing in our cross-country race in 2027 on the Trans Am. So excited to see this thing all put together for him. We have tons of more projects coming up here. We're really, one of our New Year's resolutions this year is to really focus on trying to get more content out to you guys and show you what we're doing here at the shop on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of stuff planned for 26, and hope you guys like, subscribe, and tune in for the next one.